This is your Day X World War III situational report. I'm sure many of you know by now, but B-52 Stratofortress nuclear-capable bombers are now en route to the Middle East. Of course, this is a strategic platform which is capable of delivering nuclear payloads, which of course is very concerning in light of the developments with Iran and Israel. In addition to that, the United States is also deploying the USS Georgia nuclear submarine capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, which of course can be nuclear tipped, and 2 guided missile destroyers that are currently on combat duty in the Red Sea area. In addition, we have the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Carrier Group, and I don't doubt there's not more big boomer nuclear submarines in tow. Now, all of this, of course, to establish a force posture against the Iranians in an attempt to deter them from doing this crushing response strike against Israel. That's the exact quote from Ayatollah Khamenei, is that we're going to be demonstrating a crushing response against Israel. And it could very well happen in the next few days. According to U.S. officials, they're claiming that this attack may come on or near Election Day. Now, Iran has issued a notice to airmen between the dates of November 4th and November 6th. Incidentally, of course, smack dab in the middle of that is Election Day. Is Iran planning on disrupting the election by doing this strike at that point in time? And what sort of effect will it have on the elections? The western part of Ukraine will be cleared for a live fire military exercise, which, although not uncommon, of course, this is going to definitely impact the skies over Iran. They're saying it's only up to 10,000 feet, so I'm not sure what that means for most commercial flights. Nonetheless, this could just be another attempt at inducing readiness fatigue with Israel. We've seen this on both sides of the fence. Both sides will posture and engage in this form of psychological warfare to try to tire the other side out. And then once, of course, they begin to rest on their laurels, that is when they do the strike. We, of course, seen that when we've seen Iran wait for 2 months to respond to the Khamenei assassination, when they, of course, rained down dozens of ballistic warheads on Israeli air bases. Now, it's important to understand that this is a casus belli for war in the minds of the Iranians. The first attack that Iran did against Israel was in response to the attack on the Syrian consulate, the Iranian consulate in Syria, which, of course, took out several IRGC generals. That, of course, was a very tame response by the Iranians. Then, of course, Israel assassinated the Hamas political leadership, Khamenei, inside Iran on the new president's inauguration day. And that, of course, went without response for about 2 months until, of course, we've seen that massive response after the assassination and decapitation of Hezbollah. So it's expected that this time, because this one will be a response to an actual attack by Israel using their warplanes inside Iran, allegedly taking out all of Iran's Western high-end air defense systems and killing 5 soldiers. That, of course, is casus belli for war, and this is why the Ayatollah is quoted as saying, we are going to be exacting a crushing response against Israel. So what we're about to see here is pretty substantial. And the problem is, with the election, we may not know the election results until maybe 48 hours, maybe 48 weeks for all we know. It could be, it could be one of those things that drags on and on for weeks. I would say that if we don't know decisively, unanimously who the victor is after 48 hours, there's a very good chance that this could get dragged out for several weeks. And how that is going to affect the geopolitical happenings around the world is unclear. But I think a lot of what is being waited for here is to see whether or not Trump is going to be the one who is entering into office. Because, of course, if Trump enters into office, then it's a green light on Iran. And intuitively, it seems as though this current government is setting Trump up to go to war in the Middle East. Like, it seems like all the pieces, if you look at the military hardware that is currently moving into place, it appears as though that is the case. Now, I'm going to elucidate on the Iranian nuclear program today, because that is the crux of the matter here when it comes down to it. But just a few more bullet points to clarify with respect to what is about to go down and the military deployments, as well as what other countries might be implicated in the upcoming attacks. So we have the Iraqi PMC paramilitary groups. They've reportedly been placed on a high level of readiness as they prepare to join the war against Israel. The Ayatollah has pledged that this attack, in contrast to the previous ones, is going to actually be a coordination with what they call the axis of resistance. That means that you're likely going to have saturation of the defenses of Israel prior to Iran launching their massive salvo of ballistic missiles. So this means that Hezbollah, possibly elements in Syria and Iraq, are going to first conduct an attack, and that's going to be followed up with an attack by the Iranians. And of course, that's going to make their attack far more impactful if they can successfully pre-saturate and pre-exhaust the defenses there. So it's looking like this is going to be a big one. It is definitely about to go down. We're talking about a crushing response. Now, Israel has threatened Iraq in response to this, but it's also important to note that the Iranians are threatening the Americans as well. Here's the exact quote from Ali Khamenei. He said, "The USA and the Zionist regime will receive a crushing response for their actions against Iran and the resistance front." So clearly directing that message against the United States. Is he just referring to the defensive systems that are currently in place? Is he referring to perhaps elements of the Jordanian Air Force who are partaking in Israel's defense? Or is he referring to the military bases throughout the Middle East that are, of course, sitting duck tripwires, just waiting to bring the United States into a broader war? The Secretary of Defense ordered the deployment of additional ballistic missile defense destroyers, fire squadrons, and tanker aircraft, and several U.S. Air Force B-52 Stratofortress, as we indicated, into the region. The Strike Carrier Group Abe Lincoln will be working alongside the THAAD missile system recently sent to Israel to try to protect Israel from Iran's coming onslaught. So I don't know why Iran would be waiting if they knew that these systems were being moved into position. The time to act would be to act now. Now, here's the thing. If Iran goes through with this, they know they have to go for broke. So clearly they must have intelligence. If Iran goes through with this attack, they must have intelligence that is suggesting that Israel will instigate a broader conflict and that it is inevitable, and that their response has to establish a certain degree of deterrence, which is going to, at least in part, incapacitate part of Israel's capability to launch a counterstrike. So I think that this is going to be a massive attack. It has to be. And I think the attack is only going to happen if Iran is anticipating that the United States in Israel is going to ramp it up again. Because I don't see them having any interest in doing that, at least not at this point in time, aside protecting their proxy interests, which is arguably, a good reason to do so. But nonetheless, it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would try to escalate things at this point in time. It just doesn't seem strategic unless the Russians are feeding them intelligence. Biden has sent a message to Iran indicating, and this is according to Axios, so take it with a grain of salt, the Biden administration has sent several messages to Iran in recent days urging them against another attack on Israel, stating that they will not be able to restrain the Israelis from launching a major retaliatory strike. We all know that the United States and Israel are, let's just say, each other's vassals, to keep it simple. There's an ongoing debate between who's bitch. Let's just say they're each other's vassals, all right? And there's no doubt that the United States is going to be brought into this conflict. All the statements made by Patrick Ryder, by Lloyd Austin, and now by Joe Biden, of course, indicate that this time the United States may assist in a offensive capacity. I don't see why they would be sending the strategic forces there otherwise. These are the only systems that are capable of even tarnishing Iran's military capabilities. Now, as for their nuclear capabilities, this is important information for people to realize. Iran is already effectively a de facto nuclear state, okay? So many of you are familiar with the JCPOA deal, which is a deal brokered by Europe, the Americans, and the Iranians. I don't think it was initiated by the Americans, and the Russians, of course, played a very instrumental role in this. And the goal was to allow Iran to get civilian nuclear energy without the risk of them being able to weaponize it. That deal fell through on Trump's last term. In addition, we almost had a war with Iran start. Were it not for COVID, I think it likely would have spiraled out of control with the assassination of Soleimani. So Iran has committed to a new strategic deterrence posture for 2025. What that means is that they want to achieve what's called counter-value deterrence. There's counter-value deterrence and counter-force deterrence. Counter-value means targets that are of a socioeconomic or infrastructural civilian type nature, whereas counter-force would be to attack military targets, typically what you would attempt to do in a first nuclear strike. Iran wants the ability to demonstrate substantial counter-value deterrence capability, so to deter and prevent the United States from Israel from wanting to take a crack at their nuclear program. Because, of course, if they can establish that, hey, we can blow Israel off the map, if they can demonstrate that, or if they have the technology to do that, that would prevent Israel or the United States from ever initiating a conflict, because the stakes would be too high. And now that they know that the Iranian weapon systems can beat Israeli defense, not only beat it, but beat it with pinpoint precision, as has been demonstrated since 2020. I don't know if you guys remember, but back in 2020, after the Soleimani assassination and after that tragic attack on the airliner that the Iranians screwed up, they thought it was a fighter jet or something like that, or a bomber, and they blew it up. They actually did hit elements of American bases with pinpoint precision, okay? So they have the demonstrated capability to do this, but they've yet to really leverage all of these options. Now, so in order to establish counter-value deterrence, you need nukes. How many nukes do they want? They want at least 10 nuclear weapons, because they need to demonstrate that they can wipe out 10 counter-value targets within Israel, as that would effectively cripple the country, and it would make it essentially uninhabitable and unmanageable, especially when you have wars raging on all fronts and you have resistance movements gaining more momentum, and now you have about 2 million pissed off Gazans who are just looking for an excuse, right? Looking for an opportunity. So Iran has voluntarily restrained its nuclear enrichment. In addition to that, they've also restrained their development of their longer range weapon systems. Iran does have the capability to create ICBMs. They work very closely with the North Koreans and the Russians, and they've willingly decided to not extend their weapons-based program, so not to perhaps pose a threat to Europe and the United States, so not to bring more sanctions upon themselves. But what they really don't want to do is, trigger this preemptive strike before they are ready. But because they are party to the Non-Proliferation Nuclear Treaty, which is really just a formality that I don't think they care about so much, but it's surface level stuff, and it's a front that they have to maintain, they have ways to circumvent their being signatory to this non-proliferation treaty. One of those ways that Iran can put together a nuclear weapon in record time, I mean in like 24 hours, is because they have fissile material sufficient for over a dozen warheads. Now, at least on paper, it is not enriched to the 90% or so that you need it to be in order to be nuclear capable. It's currently, as far as we know, they have enough fissile material to make 12 nuclear warheads and beyond, and this was back earlier in the year. Okay, so we don't know how much they have now. They have 6th generation centrifuges that can whip this stuff up rather quickly. So from 60% to 90% doesn't take that long with their newest centrifuges. So in order to make the actual nuclear bomb material, it's not going to take that long. Okay, they have several enhanced enrichment facilities, and all of these are underground. One of these is the Fordo enrichment plant, and this is one that has been designed to withstand a strategic nuclear strike. Okay, we're talking about multiple several hundred kiloton warheads falling smack dab on this place, and it is built to withstand that. And they have facilities like this all throughout Iran. Now, they are claiming that they can turn out one of these nuclear weapons per day at the flick of a switch if the fatwa is canceled by the supreme leader. And because, of course, in Islam, I guess it's taboo to make nuclear weapons or something. So, but they're willing to, I guess, forego that in light of the circumstances. So this effectively renders them a de facto nuclear power. But that's not all it takes to create a nuclear weapon. You need the nuke, you need the detonator, and then you also need the deployment system. Now, we've talked about two of those things. They have the deployment system. They have multiple types of ways that they could deploy this. And they have enough of these missiles that they could launch enough to easily overwhelm Israeli missile defense, as well as however many THAAD systems they want to throw in there. The 48 interceptors, let's say there's 96 interceptors, even if they reload them, they could easily saturate that. And you're not going to know which one is the nuke because it's flying in. Maybe they have some technology for that, but I don't know. The THAAD is a very detailed, high-resolution radar, so maybe it does have a way of determining which one is the nuke. Anyways, what they need is a Neutron Initiator, okay? This is the trigger for the nuclear explosion. Now, traditional initiators, they rely on radioactive isotopes like tritium. But the problem is, if you want to make tritium, it's obvious if you are under the microscope of the International Atomic Energy Agency. If the above-ground nuclear facility, if you're trying to create tritium, and I don't know anything about the process, this is beyond my pay grade, but apparently it's a process that is detectable, okay? So if a nuclear breakout state, if they want to be able to create the initiator, they need to find another way if they want to escape this sort of prying by the IAEA. So the way to do this is with something called uranium deuterium-3 Neutron Initiator, and this can be made independent of reactor base production. So this is not going to tip off international inspectors, although I don't know how active they currently are. In Iran, right now, they might still be there, but I don't know in what capacity. Apparently, Iran is being somewhat protective, especially in light of all the developments this year. So this is a far more sophisticated design. It does the same thing. It detonates the nuke, but the Iranians know how to build it. And the rumor is that they got this technology, or they were working on it in tandem with the North Koreans, and this is the result of a Mossad intel heist back in 2018, okay? So they're working with the North Koreans and the Russians hand in glove in order to build out their nuclear program. So essentially the clock is ticking in terms of the balance of power in the Middle East. The only way that Israel can foreseeably defeat Hezbollah, if Hezbollah is going to be continuously fed by Iran, by Iraq, by Syria, is to cut off the head of the snake. And this is why they're starting to roll out the Shah's son, what's his name? I can't remember what his name is, but this is why he's starting to get more public attention, because they're trying to put this there for Iranians as an option, hoping that the country can descend into civil war and hoping that they can create some sort of puppet government, color revolution in that country in order to overthrow it. Because there's no way that you're going to be able to go to war with Iran. It's just not going to happen. Now, when the war starts, there's going to be a lot of resistance inside Iran, but they have their own military, paramilitary inside Iran to police the population, and I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 8 million strong. So it's fairly sizable, and that's just to police the domestic population. So it's very likely the shizzy is most definitely going to hit the fizzy, and this is why today at the UN, the Federation of American Scientists is urging support of a UN draft resolution on nuclear war effects. This hasn't been done since 1989, okay? So the UN is proposing that they do this research to see exactly, using modern technology, what the simulations might render out for how a nuclear war would play out and how it would factor with all of the new nuclear technology and the deployment systems and the amount of nuclear weapons out there. But it was abstained by, I believe, 5 out of the, is it 9 or 10 nuclear companies, and 3 countries just outright said no. So all of the countries with nukes, with the exception of China, said yes. And it makes you wonder, what does Russia and the United States not want the world to know about the effects of nuclear war? Now, is the result of such an inquiry, is it something beyond what a nation state could do itself? I don't know. I'm sure that China could do its own research, but perhaps they want people to know, or they're trying to suss out whether or not nuclear winter is actually a reality. And what if the Americans and the Russians know that nuclear winter is largely a hoax, as we talked about in our recent video? It is just a hypothesis, and one that's built on tenuous evidence at best. Now, if that is the case, that means that nuclear war is far more survivable than we've been led to believe. And that means that the threshold for using nuclear weapons, as it would be determined by such a UN inquiry about the effects of nuclear weapons, could actually create an environment where people are more inclined to use them, because the fear of the outcomes, the long-term effects, would not be as bad as initially thought. So something to keep in mind anyways, okay? And according to Reuters, this is to corroborate what I said earlier, Iran is planning a large-scale operation to bypass the THAAD defense system. That's from Reuters. Now, on the Ukrainian front, I don't have a whole lot of news today. I know the Russians are making a lot of gains, and this is why NATO is panicking, but they're being very quiet about it right now. It's looking as though NATO is seriously debating shooting down drones, at least in Romania. In Poland, the idea is kind of being shelved. Poland is saying that the Americans are pushing them into doing this, or they're being nudged by elements in the UK, I should say, to start shooting down these drones. And this, of course, was why the Poles are being armed by the United States, so that they can be the next patsies. And they're saying, Radoslaw Sikorski is saying that, no, it's actually, you know, we're not wanting to get involved in that capacity, but we're being pushed in that direction. Now, what's likely going to happen is you're going to see more sheep-dip mercenaries, and you will see another round of mobilization in Ukraine to the tune of 160,000 troops in the coming months. They're going to lower the age, okay? Now, Czech president had said that 60 citizens were now authorized to fight in Ukraine, citizens. So these are likely sheep-dip mercs, basically taken out of their native country BDUs and thrown into Ukrainian ones, and said, hey, okay, now you're allowed to go and fight in Ukraine. A total of over 180 Czechs have applied to join the Ukrainian army. And this, of course, is just a start, right? Czech law bans citizens from joining foreign military formations without presidential authorization, which they now have. I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to be doing another video later on today. I would encourage you guys to go and check out my most recent video that I released yesterday, which talks about my 6-month foray into off-grid life. And I say off-grid in air quotes because you're never really truly off-grid. I mean, in order to get off-grid and to live off there indefinitely, I mean, the amount of stuff you would need is just through the roof, but you can get established. This is the result of 13 years of hard work. You know, I could just, all the money that I've amassed that I've saved by not, doing anything, but just staying prepped, I could have spent it on a high-rise condo or something like that. But I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm getting an acreage, and, I built it out. We got everything on the acreage, and so that's what I show you guys in that video. And I hope you find it informative. And I'm going to maybe do another video where I talk about things that I might have done differently. It's a little bit early still to talk about that because 6 months, but I've built out all the fundamentals. I mean, we have geothermal covered, we have the well, we have the solar, we have the greenhouse, we have the food forest, we have some redundancies for water. Security is something I'm big on. Animal husbandry is something we need to work on as well. But, I think I'm reaching a point now where I can say, well, I might do this differently next time. And, perhaps if I was on a smaller budget, what I might do. But I'm not a homestead expert. But in order to be a source that you would come to for information for preparedness, it's incumbent on me to have these skills. Okay, so I've always felt at a loss in terms of not considering myself an expert, but just having a well-rounded enough amount of knowledge. You can only be so knowledgeable when you're living in the city, and that's just a fact, right? Which is not to say that anything that's in the rural environment, it's not beyond anybody. And there's a certain arrogance sometimes and a certain elitism that comes with the rural communities when they talk down about city people. But anybody can do this. If you have the will and the motivation, there's a lot to learn, okay? But if you have a good work ethic and you're not afraid to get dirty, then it doesn't matter, okay? You'll be able to figure it out. And anyways, go check out those videos, guys, because I'm seeing by the ratios in terms of the daily updates to the Blue Strip videos, there's a lot of people who understand the why of preparedness, why we need to do what we're doing, but doesn't seem to be a lot of people focusing on the what, when, and how you're going to deal with the aftermath. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Can ever out.